right.
So, without further ado, I appreciate everyone coming to, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce Tom Thomas, and thank you, Tom, for coming today.
Thank you. I like it when they applaud beforehand because, you know, telling what they're going to do afterwards. I am not a technical expert on this subject. However, I have read a great deal about it. In fact, I've made it kind of a personal mission to study the fracking thing. And believe me, once you get into it and you find out all the different sources of information, there's a lot out there to know. So we're going to start with some basics. This is a traditional fracking well. We've got shaft going down. There's some zones down here where there's some gas that we want. We force down, 5,000 gallons of water, some sand, some chemicals. We use about 700 psi of pressure. We fracture up this area, the gas comes out. And we've got a lot of those wells in Michigan, a bunch of them. I don't know if you know where the Antrim Shale is. It runs right across the state, sort of from Alpena to the Sleeping Bear Dunes, more or less. And those wells have been there for a long time, most of them, and they're kind of petering out now, which is sort of the source of the new discussion that we're having. We need some new wells, somebody thinks. Here's what goes on. We drill a well, we put steel and cement casings around it to keep stuff from leaking out of it. Freshwater sand mixture forced down. In horizontal fracking, which we're about to talk about, explosive charges go down. It's a different thing. Shale's fractured, sand hole cracks open. That's why the sand goes down, to hold the cracks open that are made from the pressure. The water mixture comes back, some of it. That's called flow back. It's toxic. So it's trucked away to a disposal well somewhere, and the gas is hooked up to a pipeline, and winds up in your kitchen after some other stuff happens to it. Now, horizontal fracturing, and I wish I had a bigger picture of this, but basically, the difference is the well turns and goes horizontally. And there's a bunch of complicated reasons, but the simple reason that you want to do that is if the shale is very deep, the Antrim shale is about 1,000 feet. That's what we've been doing since the 40s or 50s or something. The new shale that they think has got billions of dollars of gas in it is called the Collingwood shale, and it's 10 to 12,000 feet deep. And you can't drill that many wells that deep economically. So the idea is you go down, then you go out, and then you fracture, you get a much broader area out of one well by going sideways. The problems here are, first you got to drill a well, do a casing, then you have to blow holes through it with explosive charges, and now the pressures are vastly, vastly higher, 20 times the pressure of a vertical well and a horizontal well, and the amounts of water used are orders of magnitude greater. We set the record over here in Kalkaska County, 42 million gallons on one well pad, and that's because the wells are so much deeper and so much longer, and it takes so much more pressure. So there's a whole bunch of new concerns that come up when you get into horizontal fracking. Now, one of the concerns, the shale runs all over the place. I mean, if you look at the state of Michigan, most of it is Collingwood shale at the 12,000 foot depth. And it's a little bit south of the top tier and a little bit west of the lake, but it covers a good deal of the state. So in order to get all the gas, what they do is they'll do a well pad, let's say 40 acres, usually a unit that the DEQ will require you to have, and you'll sink vertical wells, and then you'll drive a whole bunch of horizontal wells out of that one pad. They're showing 16 per pad here in this drawing. That is not a fixed number. It could be 12, could be 10, something. But this gives you an idea. These things are roughly a mile long. So you've got sort of a rectangle here, 2 miles long and half a mile wide with a well pad in the middle. But to get all the gas, of course, you got to have a whole bunch of them. I mean, you know, you're covering the whole area to get the gas up. And this is what a well pad looks like. One of my favorite pictures of it, anyway. It can get pretty busy. There's an enormous volume of trucks coming in and out of these places, bringing fresh water in, bringing toxic water out, chemicals, et cetera, tools and equipment, and it can be a pretty big operation. That's as the picture says, a typical multi-well pad. Okay, you know which one to hit?
Yeah.
There's a page up and a page down, right? But see, if we want to go backwards, then we have to page up.
All right.
All right, and this is kind of some of the less pleasant parts of the site. They usually have a pit for waste before they tank it up. Lots of nasty stuff goes in there. There's chemicals all over the place. Tons of trucks, obviously. Yeah. So, does anything ever go wrong? Well, as a matter of fact, yes. Out in Colorado, 29,000 of them were flooded very recently, and nobody even knows where all the stuff went. I mean, it washed down the Platte River to the tune of, it's never been measured, but enormous pollution in the Platte River. And I don't have a list in my presentation of the chemicals that they use, but I can name a few. Benzene, toluene, cancer-causing, nasty, toxic stuff. Only about 30% of them are nasty and toxic, but they're always there. Yeah?
Isn't it true that the oil companies have in fact waived certain federal legislation associated with water and so on?
The
Water Rights Act,
fracking,
etc.
Yes, the fact
And
is,
it's
we'll slide on
proprietary.
that, but I'll answer it now. It's called the Halliburton loophole. It was negotiated by Dick Cheney in 2005, and it exempts fracking companies from pretty much all of the federal Clean Air and Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act. There's a whole list of them. The Environmental Superfund Act. They're out of all of them. They're not subject to any of those laws. But they do have explosions. They have floods. They have leaks. So, this is what a fracking site in Wyoming looked like after the drilling was complete. And this goes back to my slide about, you know, all those those horizontal wells coming out here. They, you know, the whole thing interlocks together.
Are there any homes in that?
Yeah, not anymore.
It almost looks like a,
Oh, that's just a big parking lot there, I think. That is something to mention, by the way. Some studies have been done about the effect on property values of having fracking near you. If your house has a fracking operation within sight or sound or smell of it, 25% is about the minimum you can expect to lose of your property. 75% can easily be lost if you're close enough to have real pink stuff. If your water goes bad, as happens to lots of people, then it's 100%. You can't sell it.
no.
So, but they are going to pay you something like $1,000 a year.
Wow.
You are correct. The gas company will compensate you, and they'll put a 500-gallon, they call them water buffaloes. They're all over the front yards in Pennsylvania. They'll put a 500-gallon fresh water buffalo out in your front yard so your family will have water. They'll pay you something, and you'll sign a non-disclosure agreement that you may never speak about any of this, about what happened, or what they paid, any of that stuff. There was just a case in Pennsylvania where some lawyer said this family had a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, and they. Yes, the gag order applies to them too. They cannot mention any of this stuff.
Wow.
I'm telling you. Okay, well that's Wyoming. Let's see another one here.
Oh, my.
This, I'm almost certain is Pennsylvania because I don't know anywhere else that has that much fracking going on right now. But they can, they can just take over, as you can see.
Oh, there are homes in there.
Oh yeah, well farms. You can see the farms.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to ask yourself, would you want to eat something from that farm? Yes.
I was just going to say, the federal law says
the regulation is only 350 yards from a home or a school. And the air pollution alone, covers that easily, let alone.
Yeah, and I can show you, actually, I deleted those slides.
But I mean, the law is so minimal
Right.
that they could go closer.
And I can show you, although I took the slides out because Peggy thought they were too controversial. I can show you aerial pictures of wells much closer to schools and homes and baseball fields, and way closer than 350 yards. So they don't necessarily follow even locally. Let's go another. Okay, and here's the one that you don't hear much about, but it's a huge problem, especially in Pennsylvania, although I think it's going to be a problem here too. When you start digging stuff, bringing stuff up out of the deep depths, there's radium and strontium and thorium and all kinds of stuff down there. And they're having a problem now. The tributary of the Allegheny River, here, this fracking thing, it's got radium at 200 times normal levels in the river. There are people, I could get you some YouTube videos, but there's some very sad stories about the guys that drive the waste trucks, the truck drivers, that haul the stuff. They're all coming down with leukemia and other cancers because their waste is so radioactive. Yes, ma'am.
Hasn't the state of Michigan addressed that issue with the radium coming out of the well?
How would they do that?
I believe that the DEQ said that they forbid them, they were spreading it on the roads. is what I heard. And that they,
You are correct.
okay.
You are
That
correct.
was the flowback.
That was the flowback waters that we talked about.
Correct.
When you push all that water down there, well, some of it's going to come back up.
Mhm.
And one of their solutions for getting rid of that was to put it in a tanker truck, spray it on your road to hold down the dust and whatnot.
Correct,
Well,
and they stopped,
that-
they
They have stopped
legislated
that.
or they
Yes.
regulated that they have to dispose of it down into another well?
Yes,
That's
yes, disposal wells are, yeah,
Deep
that is where we're at.
Very
But
deep.
that-
But that's
back
not
into very
entirely
deep wells.
correct, because in the new proposed rules and regulations, they can still take some of that water and spread it on for ice control and dust control, provided that the composition
Yeah.
of that
Yes.
is much less,
There are
but it still
some more complicated
has-
regulations
it
saying that
still
if it's
has
not
some
radioactive,
I
if it
haven't
doesn't
read
have
the
this and that,
regulations, so
yes,
I
you can
wouldn't
still
know.
do
But
it.
I mean,
Speak to
I
that.
just want to make
They're
sure
gonna
that
check.
it's not been stopped entirely, but it's
A lot
less
of,
toxic, but if
Okay,
it accumulates.
let's have one person at a time, please.
Okay, let's go to the next one. This just came up last week. I've had a lot of fun putting this presentation together because I got to do a whole lot of new slides because there's new stuff happening every day on the internet. This that wasn't very long ago. The Coast Guard now proposes that we're going to transport this radioactive fracking wastewater that nobody wants to touch. We're going to put it in a barge and run it down the river. What could possibly go wrong?
And then back up again? I mean,
This is
what do you do with it when you get down the river?
Okay. Now this is maybe a little out of date. Each fracking episode requires at least 1,000 truck trips on local roads. I think that's way low for the kind of fracking we're talking about here. Because we're talking about the big, deep horizontal wells. It's probably a couple thousand at least, and that's 1,000 in, 1,000 out. I mean, this is actually, you go on and look at some of the fracking videos that are out there. This is one of the biggest things that people complain about in these small towns is their town is completely changed. It's constant truck traffic all day long, all night long, 24/7. Never stops. Okay. Gosh, I wish I could remember where I got this, but I just got this recently. Actually, somebody went out and measured the noise levels. And then during the drilling process, that's the quietest thing that goes on. That's only 76 dBA at 50 feet. 76 dBA is noisy, but you don't. The OSHA doesn't make you wear hearing protection until 80, so it's below 80. On the other hand, when the fracking is going on, it's 104 dBA at 50 feet, and you'll still hear it at your house probably. That's very loud. But the worst is the compressor stations. Now, not every pad's going to have a compressor station, but you have to put a compressor station somewhere to push the gas through the pipeline. And those things, as somebody said, they can create unlivable conditions for residents in the area. They're extremely loud. And I don't know if we're going to have gas flares here. A lot of places do. You know, the excess gas, they can't get to the pipeline yet, or the pipeline hasn't been built yet, or they just burn it. Well, that's not only noisy, but horribly polluting and unbelievably wasteful. And,
That's in North Dakota that they do that.
there are flares in North Dakota that can be seen from space.
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Actually, they used to do that down by Mount Pleasant. And when you drove through that area,
You knew it.
you knew it. It just stunk of gas. And they would be burning 24/7,
They
some
don't
of them.
stop.
West Branch.
They burn all the time.
I've actually seen them, we were going through one of the worst storms we ever had, and they were really burning. It's like when no one's gonna check them.
I'm not going to go through this slide because it'll take forever, but I will put it in here because the raw gas that comes out of the ground has to go through a whole bunch of stuff before it can go to the pipeline. And this has to happen somewhere, and it's going to happen probably pretty close to where the well was. I mean, as close as they can get. And all of these things, you know, are additional industrial processes that have their own risks, noise values, pollution values, and whatever. When people say there's never been a case of water contamination traced to fracking, they're talking about the actual fracking process. And by the way, it isn't true anyway, but the actual fracking process, that's only like a week out of the lifespan of this well. You have to look at the whole picture. You have to look at everything that happens. You know, the drilling, the waste, the gas, the pipeline, all the processing. It's all part and parcel of the same deal. You can't have one without the other. They all come together. Yes. With fracking, you also get pipelines. Very appropriate, I was just saying. I found the U.S. Department of Transportation site that talks about pipeline accidents. Oh boy. In the last 3 years, 787 significant incidents involving pipelines. Now, in order to be significant to the U.S. Department of Transportation, the damage has to exceed $50,000. Okay. Total property damage over $2 billion. 211 people were injured. 41 people were killed in these accidents. And if you do fracking all over the state, you're going to have pipelines all over the state. That's one of the deals. Here's one, November 14th. See, I'm telling you, I go every day and I find new stuff and I throw in slides. This pipeline is actually at a drilling site in Milford, Texas. They had a little problem, as you can see. 800 people were evacuated from their homes. I never did hear if the fire out. I imagine it's out by now. But, yeah.
At the Telia meeting, a gentleman got up and expressed concern about some of our firemen and first responders being trained in dealing with these types of accidents.
Interestingly enough, the story from industry is, oh yes, you know, we're going to post all the chemicals in their MSDS sheets, and we're going to know everything, and we're going to bring in all your people and train. Then at the session, the subsequent session up in Alpena, at the Alpena Library, there happened to be somebody there who was a first responder. And he said, so have you been trained on it? No.
The same happened down here too.
What they say they're going to do is not necessarily what they're going to do.
Well, and what good is it if it's posted on the site? The site's on fire.
Yeah.
You want to have it before you get there.
No, I'm sorry. It's also on the DEQ website, supposedly. I haven't looked, but no, I don't, in fact, I haven't talked to anybody that's found them yet. But.
And we have to remember that in our particular area, we have a lot of families who are volunteers. They are not paid, fire people. So it affects a lot of our families in this area.
Okay, I've got a few slides here that were originally done as responses to the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality and the DNR, who of course have been holding their own informational meetings and been leasing land like crazy all over the state to drillers. And the black ink here is their statement. We've had 12,000 of them have been fracked and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but all of them were the old kind, the simple vertical ones. You know, it's a completely different thing. And that statement really doesn't mean anything. No evidence of fracking contaminated water in Michigan. Well, I talked to a lady up in Alpena who says different because her water was ruined by a well nearby.
Did she have to sign something?
Hmm? I didn't
Why
ask.
wasn't that covered?
I didn't speak to her myself.
Oh, okay.
My wife talked to her. And,
Okay.
Yeah?
Another problem is like we have a lot of contamination in our water here from other sources.
Already, yeah.
Already, like I own property, I could probably run there in about 10 minutes here on the base, and I can't have a well there because of the de-icer that went into Vanette Lake and
I heard
polluted
about that.
it.
That's a horrible
And
deal.
actually, I think Vanette Lake will not totally freeze over because of so much de-icer in
It's an
it.
ideal spot for fracking. All water's already ruined.
Yeah. And then another, we had Oscoda, I think it was Oscoda Manufacturing or something like that. They threw all these 55-gallon drums of pollution into the cold
Well,
creek and polluted that. So we just really don't,
We
we
don't
got
need any
enough
more.
problems right now.
okay, and again, it's the same story. They say, no evidence of fracking. Well, okay, it depends how hard you look for the evidence. But the other thing is, it doesn't mean anything because the old wells aren't nearly as dangerous.
My main concern is there have been incidences. They're just using a very technical
Oh, I've
term
got some
for
doozies coming up.
incidents.
Oh, good. Yeah, I know it.
You ready? Yeah. Okay. Oh, I love this one. The DEQ says this process of regulation, containment, and environmental protection are proven. As we just said, you know, that's fine, but they're exempt from the Safe Water Act, Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, Superfund Law, National Environmental, blah, 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 blah. So, and the fluid is considered a trade secret. Well, now, that's breaking down a little, I think, the trade secret thing, but it's still not wonderful. Okay. This was an interesting thing to me because they're always bragging about how wonderful our regulations are. You know, we've got the toughest regulation in the country. I just saw that in the paper this week. They Alcona, what's it? They had that DEQ thing. And I happened to have done a little research on this. There are lots of laws that you can pass statewide. A lot of the states require disclosure of the chemicals. We don't. They require notification intent to frack. We don't. They require disclosure of wastewater details. What's in that wastewater? We don't. They require disclosure to healthcare providers in the area of what people may be exposed to that they may be seeing in their examining rooms. Mm-hmm. There's an organization on Facebook called Doctors Without Fracking Gags. Because there are gag orders in several states, I don't know if we have it or not, that forbid the doctor to tell you what you've been exposed to, even if he figures it out.
Pennsylvania is one of them.
Why? Why is it?
Yeah.
Because if you know what chemical you've been exposed to, you might be able to trace it back to the fracking company and sue them. They don't want that. That's why this stuff is a trade secret.
I understand that Colorado just has enacted some tough.
Colorado is, that is the front line of the fracking battle right now is in Colorado. I have several slides coming up on Colorado. First it said 3, but then I think there was a recount and it's actually 4 cities in Colorado that passed fracking ban. They'll all be sued by the oil companies, gas companies. Yeah, Bob.
Tom, are you saying that if Michigan were to enact those 4 criteria, then would you support fracking?
Okay, yeah. Somebody just asked me, hey, did you read all this stuff that DEQ wants to do in the paper? And they're listing all these proposed regulations and whatnot. And I did look at them. I said, but what's the difference? You know, the fact is, this cannot be done safely. I don't care how many regulations you put on it. Yes.
Can you please explain to me, and I have a science background, how you detoxify contaminated water and where you might store millions of gallons of toxic water?
I can answer part 2.
Goes back into the earth in rain and snow runoff.
The answer to part 2, for part 1 of your question is no. There's no way.
You can't.
You can't fix it. All right.
And near the Great Lakes? Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Okay. That's a great point. But
Really?
the answer to the second question is there are lots of wells, dry, dead, former wells that played out, the gas is gone, whatnot, in this state, and that's where it goes, down the well.
Down in the well.
In theory, they don't bring the level up to anywhere near where the aquifers or groundwaters would be. It's kept very deep.
Until they run out of 10,000 feet. It's a corporation.
I'm telling you what they say. I don't know what they do, but I'm telling
They'll
you.
never
what they
be
say.
enough.
Yeah. Good. Here's a law that not everybody knows about. It's the Michigan law, compulsory pooling. And this is right off their website. Part 615 of the Natural Resources Act, blah, blah, blah. Compulsory pooling may affect the following persons: mineral owners who do not agree to lease. Oh my. In other words, they come to you, you say, hey, we want to drill on your land, would you please sign this lease? They say, no, go away. But your neighbors said, yeah, that's fine. Oh, too bad, you're sucked in too. Huh?
Actually, they're changing the verbiage too. It's not going to be compulsory, it's going to be statutory, which means you will have to. They're changing that language right now.
They are?
That's part of their new DEQ regulations. If you go back on their site, they've got compulsory crossed out,
Yep,
and
yep.
it's going to be statutory.
Oh, I'll be darned.
So
Okay.
you will have
I'll
to
have
do
to
it.
change my
If-
slide.
Even if your neighbor decides to and you don't, you will be part of that
You're
pool.
still in there.
And you will also
You can't
have to
stop
pay a portion of your proceeds
Oh, yeah.
to the oil company for doing the drilling. So
Yes.
this is another one.
Yeah, also, there has been groups that are forming to to set out contracts. So they say, why should we pay for them putting the drilling on? If you can get enough people in your area to go together as a group and say, okay, they have a bargaining power, a bargaining chip now. So even though you're going to be forced into it, at least you can bargain with the oil company.
You're talking about people with mineral rights.
With mineral rights.
Right.
And it's like my mother has 160 acres right next to the national forest.
Just right for a couple of well pits.
Yeah, and which she's freaking out about. But there are some groups, Mike Miller, I think is his name, they're doing, in fact, I went to one of their meetings already before.